A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John, chapter 3, verses 7 to 15. Passage taken from the Message version of the Bible. So don't be so surprised when I tell you that you have to be born from above, out of this world, so to speak. You know well enough how the wind blows this way and that. You hear it rustling through the trees, but you have no idea where it comes from or where it's headed next. That's the way it is with everyone born from above by the wind of God, the Spirit of God. Nicodemus asked, "What do you mean by this? How does this happen?" Jesus said, "You're a respected teacher of Israel, and you don't know these basics? Listen carefully. I'm speaking sober truth to you. I speak only of what I know by experience. I give witness only to what I have seen with my own eyes. There is nothing second-hand here, no hearsay. Yet, instead of facing the evidence and accepting it, you procrastinate with questions. If I tell you things that are as plain as the hand before your face, and you don't believe me, what use is there in telling you of things you can't see, the things of God? No one has ever gone up into the presence of God except the one who came down from that presence, the Son of Man. In the same way that Moses lifted the serpent in the desert so people could have something to see and then believe, it is necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up, and everyone who looks up to him, trusting and expecting, will gain a real life, eternal life." The Gospel of the Lord.
Reflections on the Gospel according to John chapter 3 verses 7 to 15. The Gospel continues from yesterday's passage on the encounter between Nicodemus and Jesus. Nicodemus was the symbol of all those who could not think beyond their comfort zones of past traditions and customs. His mind was darkened by his own qualifications. The newness of life offered by Jesus was beyond his understanding. The prophets of Israel had consistently challenged the futility of their religious practices, which were more of scrupulous observance of the Thora, while ignoring concern, compassion, and love for the brethren. Nicodemus would fade from the story, at least temporarily, and the dialogue between Jesus and Nicodemus would now turn into a monologue of Jesus. Although placed on the lips of Jesus, the actual discourse is the composition of the evangelist John, who wrote the Gospel over 60 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Speaking as companion of Jesus and as a member of the Spirit-filled community, he had experienced the new birth promised by Jesus. He had experienced exclusion from the Jewish religious system and had lived with the fellow members of the community of believers whose lives had radically changed since they had been born from above. And it continues to invite us to be born again, to leave the old that is in us. When this happens, the Spirit takes us and the miracle occurs. New birth in the Spirit would be birth to eternal life, a way of living within the temporal but transcending it and enduring beyond death. Eternal life would mean entering into the values of truth, love, and beauty of Christ, who rose from the dead and is ever-living God. The incident about the snake in the desert had been recorded in the book of Numbers and had occurred while the Israelites were wandering through the desert of Sinai before their occupation of the promised land. We would see the reference to this image on 2 more occasions in the narrative, which means in the community of John, the symbol of the snake raised on the pole evidently became a cherished symbol, helping them to make sense of the death and resurrection of Jesus. The gospel brings us the message of hope, a hope that tells us that there is something more beautiful and profitable on the other side of our struggles in life. Our various life experiences are our baptism through which we will be born again. And in this journey, keep our gaze fixed on the cross, which is the only antidote for the poison of sinfulness.